And welcome back. As we go ahead and get ready to switch gears a little bit, up to this point we have been giving input through the console. But there's actually another way to get input, which is actually from reading in from a file. And so today we're going to go ahead and look at this through a text file. So the scanner class is pretty handy. One of the obviously things we can do is we can get user input, but we can also use it to read in from text file input. And keyboard input, of course, is just we sit down at the keyboard, we type things in. Great, awesome. But reading in from a file is also very helpful because sometimes we need to pull data or we need to pull information that might be in that file, and having the scanner class be able to read that in is really helpful. So it's very similar to what we've done up to this point, except this scanner object is, instead of linking to the console through the system, is actually going to link to the file that we have stored somewhere on our disk. And so reading from a text file is, again, very similar. We're going to have to import the scanner class, but we have two new classes we have to import, which is the file input stream and the file not found exception. And of course we do that with just these two statements: import java.io file input stream and import java.io file not found exception. And you notice these are slightly different because we have here the IO extension instead of the util extension, because it's not considered a utility. It's IO is for input and output. File input stream, of course, is going to handle the connection between Java and the file, so that's what we're using to read in an input stream of characters or data. And the file not found exception is used when the file the program attempts to use either doesn't exist or it can't be found where you're specifically looking for it. Alright, so let's look at some basic file input code. In this example, and we'll see this again here in a little bit, but we're going to use a try-catch block to try and open the file. And in this code, there's a lot of things in here that we may not be as familiar with. All right, we have our scanner object here, which you can see is set to null. That's a new term we haven't really talked about. We have a try block, which is what's going to hold the code that's going to attempt the open file. And then we have this catch block right down here, which is going to be where that file not found exception is coming into play. So how does that all work? There's a lot there, some different terminologies that we may not be familiar with. Well, the way this actually works is Java's first going to attempt to complete the code within the try block. So if the file is found, it's immediately going to, or not found, excuse me, it will jump immediately to that catch block. Because it makes sense. I can't find it. Well, I can't do anything else, so let's give you the appropriate code. Now, if it is found, all right, let's do whatever's in that try block. Ignore the code in the catch block, so it's just going to completely skip over it. And for our purposes right now, we're not going to worry about what an exception is or the full implementation of try-catch, because that's going to be something that's handled a little later on. Right now, let's just focus on the fact that we need it, and that will be enough for us to worry about for now. Now, once that file is read in by the scanner, you can use it just as if you normally would with any other scanner object. So, for example, you could say fileIn.nextInt or fileIn.nextDouble. And just like we saw with KB, it would be the same thing. Now, if we want to do text, obviously we have appropriate methods for that. We can do fileIn.next or fileIn.nextLine. Again, just like what we saw when we did the scanner object before, but with the KB or keyboard object. Now, we do need to talk about what happens when we reach the end of a file. In the console, so when we're typing in with ourselves, we know exactly when our last input was given. However, with a file, we may not know where our position is within that file. We may say, oh, there's only like 10 characters in here, no big deal. Well, what if you had thousands or hundreds of thousands of characters that you have to process? Well, we'd have to determine when we actually reach the end of the file, because maybe we're only reading in so many lines of input. So we could use fileIn.hasNextLine to determine if there's any data, first of all, for us to read. And this could be even before we open the program. We say, hey, is this file blank? We say, fileIn.hasNextLine. Is there any data for us to actually read in here? Well, ultimately, when we reach that end of the file, if we do go through it, we say, hey, fileIn.nextLine, is there anything more? No, okay, well, we reached the end of the file. Or even if we're not reading in everything from the file, we're going to use fileIn.close to tell Java, hey, we're all done with the resources from the file, so we're going to go ahead and close it out. So if we go ahead and look at the implementation of our code here, you can see we have our scanner object right here, so nothing new. We do have this null variable that we have in here, this value of null. And that's, again, something we're not going to talk about. Just know that for now, when we initialize our scanner, we're going to initialize it to null outside of the try block. Because what we're going to do is we're actually going to set the value of that here. Now, you could say, well, what's if I just say, like a variable, I just say file in. You could do that, but you notice then we get all these errors down here, because the issue with that is that if I don't have that equals null in there, you'll see we get those errors because this try block, as it says, this is where we set the value. And remember, it only executes this try block if it doesn't do the catch block. So we, of course, have to make sure that this file in is set to something. So we just set it to null. Now our try block again is saying, hey, let's try reading this file sample.txt. Then we're going to use our catch block right here, and it says, hey, if it's found, we're going to exit the program. And we have this command right here called system.exit0. Again, we're not going to worry about what this is or how it works for now. Just know that this is going to be here. So when you start practicing with our file input, you can pretty much just go ahead and copy this, and we'll just end up changing, like, for example, the file name that might be here within this file input stream. Now down here, this is where we are going to actually start applying some of the things that we already are familiar with. So in here, we're going to say, hey, if the file is found, we're going to continue. So I created my variables right here. So I have 2 ints, I have 2 strings. And first thing I want to do is say, is this file actually have anything? So if I look and say, is there any text in the file? And I use this file in.hasNextLine. And that's either going to return a value of true or false. If it's true, well, then that means that there's something in there. If it's false, that means that we don't have anything. So I'm going to attempt to read into integers. And then I'm going like, okay, great. Since we're changing types, maybe it's a good idea to check to see if there's more content. You don't have to do this, but it's just a nice kind of check. Okay, let's just say, is there still text in the file? It has next line, true or false. And if it is, we're going to have 2 lines read in here. All right, and then of course we're going to output those values. Now, the last thing is the file in.close, because again, that's going just to close out this scanner stream here. So let's actually go and show you how to add a text file here. Now you can, of course, go to your Explorer and add one as well, but the easiest way to do is if you're right here in Eclipse, we can actually just right click on our project folder and do a new untitled text file. And you can see it'll go ahead and open up a text file for me. So if I start typing some values, so let's just say 1 space 2 space hello, and I'm going to say goodbye. And let's just save that. You'll see that it prompts up with a window saying, hey, what do you want to save this under? Okay, so just click on the folder that you want to save it in. So since we're in 2.6 here, I'm going to save it in 2.6. And I'm just going to go ahead and call this sample, since that was the name of the file we want. And we're just going to abbreviate that with .txt to show that it is a text file. So then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. You'll see that it now shows up over here in my hierarchy. And so now I know this is part of this 2.6 project folder. And if it is in the correct place, when I run my code, you'll see that it gives me output. Is there text in the file? True. All right, so we know that there's something in there. Is there still text in the file? True. All right, because remember, this is again just it reading in these values. I could technically take out this line here, and it would run exactly the same. Again, this is just a thing for me to check about the string values. All right, then it says the file has 2 integers, 1 and 2, which if we look at our sample here, that's why I typed in 1 and 2. Then we get the words hello and goodbye as our 2 strings. And is there more text in text file? We got false. Okay, awesome. So with that being said, we know that's the end. Now, I want to show you if we start changing some of this. So let me just say I put in one more line of text. Let's just add farewell. And I rerun my program. You'll see it now changed to is there more text in text file? True, because we technically do still have more data within that text file. Another thing I want to show is you'll notice I put the string on the same line as the 2 integers. But if I move that hello down to its own line of code, and I rerun this one more time, you'll see that we have some things that have been changed. You'll notice that 1 and 2 are still the 2 integers, but our first string is now an empty string, because you notice now the second string it says is hello, which is on this next line. Because remember, this right here is technically with a next line going to read in whatever's left. Well, in this case, because there's nothing left, it's coming back as an empty string. So just a very important distinction to note there. Now, if we were just to do, for example, a let's just say a file in.next has a next line, so I'm just going to copy that real quick and just add this in like this, and I rerun it, we can then get the same output as we would have had before. And that's because this would then just read in this blank line. I'm just going to take that back out for a moment here. And the other thing I want to show is what would happen if this file wasn't in the correct place. So let's just say I go ahead and drag this and put it inside of this default package here. All right, so now it's in a slightly different location. And I run my code. Now we get file not found, exiting program. Because again, this file is not in the right place. So I want to make sure that that is actually stored here at the upper level. So I just drag that back to the 2.6 folder. And now when I rerun, we get our output again. And that is a quick introduction to using the scanner class to help us get input from a file.